Despite Donald Trump blinking on a bunch of the big disastrous tariffs on like the whole world, including like Madagascar and the island with the penguins, he announced today he's not just maintaining but increasing his tariffs on China, which is one of our largest trading partners. And among the Americans who will almost immediately feel the pain are farmers, because China buys a lot of their product and will slap tariffs on in response. Alex Wagner has been doing amazing reporting on the impact of Trump's policies on the ground. Went to North Carolina to talk to farmers about Trump's tariffs and what it means for their future and their livelihood.
Agriculture, there's about 85% of what happens on my farm that is completely out of my control.
Yeah.
So I have to do the very best I can at managing that 15% of inputs and cost and labor and marketing and signing the best contract and doing the best job that I can, and leave the other 85% up to the good Lord. And that's all we can do, whether it's weather or disease or a hailstorm or a pandemic or an administration. And we just weather the storm.
It's kind of a wait and see game. I mean, I think the main thing is not to overreact and get too nervous. I mean, stay the course. That's what's helped us, you know, all of these generations of farmers staying the course and doing what we do best and being efficient, not spending money when we don't need to spend money, and just keeping our you know, ears open and eyes open and being able to pivot when we can.
Here with me now is Alex Wagner, MSNBC senior political analyst and host of the Trump Land podcast. I loved those quotes because I think it's actually a profound insight, like a genuinely profound insight, and also like explains a lot of why a lot of folks are like,
yes,
you know, we're just going to sort of see where it all goes.
I think, you know, it was interesting being in Clayton, North Carolina yesterday as, you know, Wall Street's melting down. The financial world is flipping out. Investors are calling Trump. People can't get through. It's a different reality in red state America. All the people that I talked to at that table had voted for Trump at least once, if not multiple times. And in part because of that, but I think largely because of the attitude you have to take when you are a farmer. You are more sanguine. You are more accepting of external chaos. But I kept saying, this isn't hurricanes. This isn't weather. This isn't an act of God. This is Donald Trump making very clear decisions that put you in financial peril. And it's not just that they sell their, you know, goods to China. It's that they need farm equipment. They need lots of supplies that are manufactured in China. And they've already spent that money, Chris. The way it goes with a commodities trade is you've already put the money in the ground for the seed, the fertilizer, the equipment, the labor. They just got to hope come harvest time that they can sell it at a decent price and don't lose money. And Trump has thrown all of that up in the air, right? But what's so interesting, I think, is the empathy they feel with him insofar as the project of correcting a trade imbalance that they see has been decades in the making. The kinship they feel with him in his political project to break things and upend the status quo, and the fundamental and unspoken belief that if it all does go to hell in a handbag, as it did in 2018, Donald Trump will make sure they are made whole. So I'm speaking of the bailouts that were offered, the money, the assistance that was granted to farmers in the last Trump trade war with China in 2018. And I asked them about that and whether that was something they expected and what they thought of other people who might not be so keen on that idea. This is that conversation. The assistance that the president put in place after the last tariff increase basically erased the financial gains from that tariff increase, which I think left a lot of people scratching their heads like, well, why are we doing this to begin with? Do you feel the same way? I
feel like in the last trade war, we kind of went through the short-term pain, and I'm wondering where the gain was, maybe. We kind of came out of it in a little bit of turmoil.
I think that some people have not forgotten that, and they're saying, well, you know what? The people that voted to put this president in office, this is your guy. And if this is your guy, you got to roll with the policies he enacts. And, like, why should the rest of the country that didn't vote for him be bailing out farmers?
That's right. And they're also, those same people oftentimes demand that farmers address climate change and farmers adapt different technologies. And we have responded in spades with soil health initiatives, cover crops, using less inputs to produce more on less land with less water and higher labor costs. But those same people that make those demands are not willing to pay the cost for the American products in the store. They will buy the cheaper imported products that have much lower, their daily wage rate are less than what we have to pay an hour for our H-2A workers that are coming in. And the disparity when you're having somebody tell you how to do what you do best for a living and then not be willing to pay for the demands that they're making is laughable. We're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs because we're having to meet the regulations that are imposed to produce the quality food and address all of these other social issues we may or may not be responsible for. But at the same time, we're not seeing a return in the marketplace because American products are too expensive. And that's the tragedy of the American farmer is we produce the best and we meet the demands and we step up to the plate. But the consumer, when they go to the store, they're looking for the best deal and the best value.
It's the system that they had take issue with is the broader landscape for American farming in a global economy. And it's, I think, because of this decades-long feeling of inequity, that they'll basically go along with whatever Trump is trying to do to correct that imbalance. And anybody who stands in the way of that or says farmers don't get their due doesn't understand how difficult it is to be a farmer in America.
I mean, what's so interesting about that quote, I really think that guy's a really well-spoken and interesting fellow, is that the fundamental reality here is that one person's cost is another person's income.
Yes.
Always.
Yep.
This is Econ 101, and it's lost in so much of the debate here. So when he says...
Cost of labor.
When people talk about costs going up, it's like when you talk about like, oh, housing costs are high, it's like, that's bad. But if you say home values are rising, it's like, well, that's good. And that depends on whether you want to get into a housing market or you own a house.
Who basically say that once they put these tariffs in, then we have the right to okay them or not within a certain period of time. And that would be for all countries. And the House, once again, has given up their power to do this. And I look at what happened yesterday, and yes, there was euphoria that he made some change. But in the cold reality of today, chaos is still up. Confusion is up, and it's still a 10% tariff. And no matter what the stock market's saying, your intrepid cameraman here, the Jocko standard of looking at his 401k, and it's still down, that's what Americans are doing right now. And they know where grocery prices are up. They know that this Trump tariff tax is still a huge problem for them in their everyday lives.
Yeah, you know, Willie, we're coming to a very interesting time, and it really started happening last week with tariffs and also with immigration, where you had some very, very conservative voices on the far right coming out, being very critical of the Trump administration's immigration policies. You had Joe Rogan, not far right, Joe Rogan sort of bouncing back and forth ideologically, but also a very powerful voice, questioning what was happening on immigration. You have conservatives also now doing the same thing when it comes to tariffs, saying, take your power back. You know, we showed David French and Charles Cook agreeing with each other on that. I'm not so sure they've always seen eye to eye on the right wing of the Republican Party or conservatism. But that's sort of a growing course that you're hearing where people are saying to Congress, take your power back. Take your power back on spending. Take your power back on tariffs, on all of these other issues. But right now, it doesn't seem Speaker Johnson has any desire to exercise the constitutional powers that was given to him by the Constitution.
Yeah, basic checks and balances. Instead, we have a system where the President of the United States sits at his resolute desk, signs something, holds it up for the cameras, and says, here is my edict, go act upon it. So, Senator, I'm curious, as we talk about tariffs, sometimes this can feel like a macroeconomic conversation and debate, talking about the markets and Wall Street and everything else. But if you can take us inside your state of Minnesota and how these tariffs may already have impacted or might down the road shortly impact a business owner, let's say, or the consumers in Minnesota.
Big time. I was with small business owners just this weekend. Someone at a brewery. Why not visit a brewery when you have many small businesses? And you look at the cost of aluminum. Now, I have favored targeted tariffs. I understand that they can be very helpful in certain circumstances, and have favored some of them in the past under both Democratic and Republican presidents. But that's not what this is. This is across the board. And for small businesses that have limited money to invest, they have to now decide, even with this pause, which is still 10%, did they buy a bunch of inventory and store it because they don't know what he's going to do next because of all the uncertainty, or did they invest in expansion? For big businesses, they may be able to weather this for a while, but for small ones, they literally often will have their house on the line, that they have mortgage to be able to do this business. So small businesses, farmers who expect to be able to get their fertilizer, farmers who are completely connected to the rest of the world, this is devastating because they operate on really small margins and already have the headwinds of avian flu and all kinds of input costs. So this is very difficult for people. But the ones I'm most worried about are the consumers and the families that are looking at $1,000 a year of this Trump tariff tax.
Senator Klobuchar, the President of the United States created a global economic nightmare in the matter of a few hours. And now stability, reliability, and predictability as far as the American economy and the American government seems to be diminished in the eyes of a lot of foreign governments. What's the awareness level of the danger presented to us right now within the United States Senate? Are your colleagues as frightened and fearful of the future, the immediate future, as you seem to be?
They appear to be behind closed doors, but they seem to be more fearful of Donald Trump and then also his pal Elon Musk and the money he'd put against them in a primary if they stood up.
Yet another group that Trump pretended to care about is being absolutely chucked under his bus, his tariff bus. And even if he backs off the current round, there's still the original ones he put on Mexico and Canada. It's actually really unclear what was changed yesterday. We actually really don't know all that much. And of course, that's only for 90 days. And with Trump, honestly, it could be less than 90. I remember he said, oh, I'm going to hit Canada with tariffs in a couple months. But then a few weeks before that deadline, he did it. So, like, there's no sense of confidence here. And here's the thing with farmers. This is deja vu for them. Because if you remember, Trump was saber-rattling a lot with tariffs last time. And he threatened Canada and Mexico, and they renegotiated the USMCA, and that is his trade deal, which is why it's so egregious he's hitting Canada and Mexico with tariffs when he spent much of his presidency asking for a new trade deal with Canada and Mexico to avoid tariffs. Right? That's the point of a free trade deal. But in the first term, if any group was hurt by Trump tariff wars, it was farmers, because Trump made a lot of tariff threats, but actually did go through with them more on China in his first term, right? It was less controversial because, China's seen as a rival to the United States, and he wasn't doing it on the entire world, but it hurt farmers in the United States because one of the ways China retaliated was by specifically putting tariffs that affected, in some cases, U.S. farmers and critical agricultural industries. And it's happening again. Now the tariffs are more universal, but farmers aren't excluded. And, farmers, you don't make a lot of money on every individual piece of fruit or grain or soybean or whatever you sell. There's not a lot of profit margin in most farming, right? Even if you're talking about big giant farms, they don't make their money off luxury sales. They make it off tiny little margins over big numbers, right? And so any tariff of 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever percent is going to be devastating. And so farmers and business people that Trump cares about, people that often unite with Republicans against workers, are mad at him because he is screwing them this time again.